Some true crime stories are so fundamentally shocking, they leave a permanent mark on you. They make you confront terrible questions about the nature of evil, the fragility of life, and the kind of darkness that can hide behind a young person's eyes. The crime didn't just shock the nation. It raised terrifying questions about what could possibly lead children to do something so horrible. This isn't just a retelling of the timeline. We're going to explore the twisted thinking and broken psychology that drove for teenagers to commit an act of almost unimaginable cruelty. The case of Shanda Sharer is one of those stories. Even decades later, it remains one of the most disturbing examples of teen violence in American history. Shanda Sharer, born June 6, 1979, was a pretty typical 12-year-old girl. She grew up in a home filled with severe abuse, and allegations of incest by her father would later come out in court. Her father's history of beating his wife and children was well documented. This environment seemed to create a deep emotional instability in Melinda and a desperate, possessive need for control, especially when it came to Amanda Hivren. Her parents were divorced, but she was close with her family. Both girls were more passive and easily swayed by the stronger personalities of Melinda and Lori. Toni Lawrence was maybe the most hesitant of the four. It seems she didn't really believe Melinda was serious about killing Shanda. Her role was more of a bystander who became a reluctant accomplice, a choice that would haunt her and eventually bring the whole group down. The second the car started moving, she sprang up, held the knife to Shanda, and began an hours-long nightmare of torture. They drove Shanda to the witch's castle, a creepy, abandoned house that became the main crime scene. To avoid a potential death penalty, they all eventually took plea deals and started national conversations about juvenile crime, failures in the mental health system, and the capacity for evil in children. Shanda's family was destroyed. Her father, unable to handle the grief, fell into alcoholism and died in 2005. Melinda, Loveless, and Lori Tackett, the main actors, each got 60-year sentences. Lori Tackett was paroled in 2018 on the 26th anniversary of Shanda's murder. And in 2019, Melinda Loveless, the ringleader, was the last of the four to be released from prison. Today, all four women who murdered a 12-year-old girl are free. Hope Rippey also received a long sentence, though it was later reduced on appeal. Toni Lawrence, who cooperated with the police, received the lightest sentence of 20 years for criminal confinement. There, they beat her, strangled her with a rope, and stabbed her. Talk about it, but please, keep it respectful. These are difficult cases to understand. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing for more stories like this one. Then, the girls drove to a remote spot in Madison, Indiana. They pulled Shanda from the trunk, poured gasoline on her, and set her on fire. It's a brutal reminder of how teenage jealousy, when mixed with serious trauma and peer pressure, can explode into unspeakable violence. These are the questions that stick with you long after you hear the story. The release of all four women doesn't bring any real closure. It's just a stark reminder that while prison sentences can end, the pain inflicted on the Sharer family and the memory of a 12-year-old girl whose life was stolen is permanent. Looking at the backgrounds of the killers isn't about making excuses for them, but about trying to understand the paths that lead a young person to such a dark place. The autopsy later revealed the most sickening detail of all. Soot found in Shanda's windpipe proved she was still alive and breathing when they lit the fire. These four girls, each carrying her own pain and dysfunction, created an incredibly volatile and dangerous combination. Once Shanda's parents reported her missing, police quickly made the connection. The break in the case came fast, and it came from inside the group. That evening, the hysterical Toni Lawrence, brought in by her parents, walked into the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office and confessed to everything. Her statement gave investigators the entire roadmap. Within a day, Melinda, Loveless, Lori Tackett, and Hope Rippey were arrested. The investigation also turned up a truly chilling detail. After the murder, the four girls went to McDonald's for breakfast and apparently joked about what they had just done. Both came from troubled homes and had histories of self-harm, which points to their own inner turmoil and vulnerability. Melinda, Lori, Hope, and Toni drove to Shanda's father's house, where she was staying for the weekend. Just after midnight on January 11th, Hope and Lori knocked on the door. They lured Shanda out with a lie, telling her that Amanda Heverin wanted to meet her at a local hangout called the Witch's Castle. Shanda, thinking she was going to see her friend, got in the car, was always getting into fights at school, and told people she was suffering from depression. Lori's background was different, but just as troubling. She was raised in a very strict religious home with a controlling mother. She also had a history of mental health problems, including a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and reported hallucinations. She was known to be manipulative and could be violent. When her relationship with Amanda ended, she just couldn't handle the loss of control. In Shanda Sharer, she didn't just see a rival, she saw a problem to be erased, a way to reclaim what she felt belonged to her. In the months before the murder, Melinda openly talked about wanting to kill Shanda, a threat nobody took seriously enough. She was furious to see her ex with someone new. Friends and family started to worry. Shanda's mom saw her daughter's grades slipping and knew about the public threats from Melinda. So she transferred Shanda to a different school. She wasn't just following Melinda's plan. She was an eager participant who would help make the violence even worse. She reportedly told a friend she wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. It was this mix of Melinda's obsessive rage and Lori's violent streak that set the stage for the horror to come. Our Lady of Perpetual Help. The hope was that some distance would be enough to cool things down. But for Melinda Loveless, the obsession was just getting started. To understand why, you have to look a little closer at the girl who would become the architect of the whole crime. She was just starting to navigate those early teen years, going to a new school and making new friends. By all accounts, she had a bright personality, loved sports, and was well liked. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend with her entire life ahead of her. And the fact that her life was so ordinary makes what happened next all the more horrifying. The whole tragedy started, as it so often does, with a seemingly innocent teenage relationship. In 1992, 12-year-old Shanda Sharer was tortured and murdered by 4 teenage girls. Their motive? Jealousy over a high school romance? Before we get into the darkness, it's important to remember the person whose life was stolen. In the fall of 1991, Shanda started at Hazelwood Middle School in New Albany, Indiana. It was there she met a girl named Amanda Heverin. Their relationship started with a schoolyard fight, but soon turned into a close friendship and then a young romance. The problem was, Amanda had a past. She had just broken up with a 16-year-old girl named Melinda Loveless. That October, Melinda cornered Amanda and Shanda at a school dance. Melinda Loveless, who was 16 at the time, was the engine behind this tragedy. Her childhood was a nightmare of dysfunction and trauma. After her father left, Melinda's behavior got worse. If Melinda was the one with the obsessive motive, 17-year-old Lori Tackett was her most enthusiastic enforcer. While Melinda's rage came from a specific jealousy, Lori's seemed to come from a general desire for chaos and violence. The other two in the group were 15-year-old Hope Rippey and 15-year-old Tony Lawrence. Hope Rippey was described as a follower, someone who got swept up in the moment and would ultimately take part in the terrible final act. On the night of January 10th, they put the plan into action. Hiding under a blanket in the back seat was Melinda Loveless, holding a knife. The next morning, 2 hunters found the burned body. Because the crime was so brutal, all 4 girls were charged as adults. Crime left a deep scar on the community of Madison, Indiana. Over the years, the sentences were served. Tony Lawrence was released in 2000. Hope Rippey was released in 2006. The murder of Shanda Sharer is a story with no happy ending. What turns a troubled teenager into a killer? And can someone who does something like this at 16 ever truly be rehabilitated? If this story has you thinking, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below.